Hello, and welcome. Find a comfortable space. Perhaps you are settling in for the evening. The lights are low, and the noise of the day has finally begun to recede. Perhaps you are driving with only the hum of the engine and the long stretch of road for company. Wherever you are, I invite you to join me on a journey. It is not a journey across land or sea, but through the winding corridors of time into the quiet, dust-filled rooms of history where the official narratives fall silent. Imagine for a moment that you are standing with me in a library. But this is no ordinary library. There are no bright fluorescent lights here, no bustling librarians, no digital catalogs. The air itself feels ancient thick, with the scent of old paper-cracked leather and the faint sweet aroma of beeswax from a single candle flickering in the distance. The shelves stretch up into an impenetrable darkness, and you get the sense that if you were to reach out and touch the spine of any one of these books, you would feel the faint residual warmth of the last person who held it perhaps centuries ago. This is the library of forgotten histories. These are the books that were never meant to be read by the masses. The footnotes that were deliberately erased, the chapters that were deemed too dangerous or perhaps too inconvenient to be included in the clean, linear story we call the past. Come closer. Let us walk down one of these shadowed aisles. Each volume here represents a question that was never satisfactorily answered. Here is a tome on the impossibly precise astronomical alignments of prehistoric monuments. Beside it, a scroll detailing medical procedures from civilizations that we are told were primitive. And here is a collection of works bound not in leather, but in a shared, persistent mystery. Their titles written in faded gilt all seem to dance around a single theme, sudden endings, and enigmatic beginnings. This is where our journey truly begins. As we stand here in this conceptual space, surrounded by the ghosts of unanswered questions, allow a few more to join them. What if history is not the straight, unbroken line we were taught in school, but rather a tangled braid of narratives where some threads are deliberately hidden from view? What if the most powerful and influential organizations do not truly die, but merely transform? What if their wealth, their symbols, their rituals, and most importantly, their foundational knowledge could shed their old skin, go dormant for a time, and re-emerge centuries later under a new name in a new guise, adapted for a new world? Could a warrior monk from the 12th century, sworn to poverty, chastity, and obedience, clad in a white mantle emblazoned with a red cross, have anything in common with a gentleman philosopher of the 18th century Enlightenment, a man of science and reason, meeting in a private lodge to discuss geometry and morality? On the surface, the proposition seems absurd. The chasm of time culture and purpose separating the Knights Templar from the Freemasons appears vast and unbridgeable. History tells us one group was brutally extinguished, their legacy ending in fire and betrayal. The other, we are told, arose from the humble guilds of stonemasons, their traditions evolving slowly over centuries. And yet, the whispers persist. The echoes are too loud to ignore. The symbolic resonances are too precise to be mere coincidence. Why does the language of degrees of initiation, of sacred geometry, and of a hidden esoteric truth echo so powerfully between these two seemingly disparate fraternities? This is the central question of our exploration tonight. We are not just looking at two historical organizations. We are investigating the possibility of a lineage, a hidden stream of knowledge that flowed underground when its surface river was dammed, carving a new path through the bedrock of history to emerge transformed in another place at another time. Our mission here in this space we have created together is not to provide you with a definitive answer. The world has enough voices shouting absolute certainties. Instead, our purpose is to explore the question itself in all its fascinating, frustrating, and profound complexity. We will approach this not as zealots, but as detectives, not as preachers, but as philosophers. We will assemble the evidence for the connection, piece by piece. We will examine the symbols, the rituals, the timelines. But then, with equal rigor, we will turn and face the counter-arguments. We will listen to the voice of the skeptic, the academic historian who warns us of the human tendency to see patterns where there are none. We will build the case, and then we will attempt to dismantle it. This is a journey for those who are comfortable with ambiguity, for those who find more value in a well-formed question than in a simple answer. For those of you listening with your eyes closed, letting these words paint pictures in your mind. This is not a lecture. It is a shared meditation on the nature of secrets, the persistence of ideas, and the simple, powerful possibility that the story we have been told is not the whole story. So take a deep breath. Let the quiet of this library settle around you. Our investigation is about to begin. The anomaly at the heart of our story can be stated simply. In the early 14th century, the Knights Templar, the wealthiest, most powerful, and most secretive multinational corporation of the medieval world, vanished from the stage of history with a speed and finality that is frankly breathtaking. They were arrested, tried for heresy, and officially disbanded by papal decree. Their story, for all intents and purposes, ends there. Then a gap. A silence of nearly 400 years. In the early 18th century, another organization, Freemasonry, bursts into the public consciousness with the formation of the Grand Lodge of England in 1717. This fraternity, filled with the era's most influential thinkers, scientists, and politicians, is structured in a strikingly similar hierarchical fashion. It employs arcane rituals, secret modes of recognition, and a symbolic language rich with architectural and geometric allegories, symbols that bear an uncanny and some would say an uncomfortable resemblance to the esoteric traditions associated with the Templars. So, how does mainstream history explain this? The conventional explanation is one of convergence and romanticism, not lineage. The academic consensus posits that there is no direct provable link between the Templars and the Freemasons. Historians argue that early Freemasons of the 17th and 18th centuries were educated men fascinated by the past. In seeking to create a compelling and ancient pedigree for their new fraternity, they simply adopted the lore of the Knights Templar. The Templars, with their mystique of lost treasure, secret knowledge, and tragic martyrdom, were the perfect candidates for retroactive ancestors. In this view, the similarities are not evidence of survival, but of a deliberate romantic and somewhat nostalgic invention. The connection is a myth, a noble lie created to give a new organization an old soul. It's a clean, logical explanation. And for a long time, it has been the final word on the matter. But a story is only the final word until a new question is asked. To understand the sheer seismic shock of the Templars' disappearance, we must first inhabit their world. We must strip away the modern lens and attempt to see them as their contemporaries did. Forget for a moment the conspiracy theories and the novels. Let us travel back to the year 1300. Imagine you are a merchant in Paris, or a farmer in the English countryside, or a pilgrim traveling to Rome. In your world, there are three great powers that shape your existence. There is your local king or feudal lord whose laws you must obey. There is the church, centered on the Pope in Rome, which holds the keys to your eternal salvation. And then there is the order of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar. And they are different. They are a law unto themselves. A Templar preceptory, one of their thousands of fortified landholdings across Europe, is not just a farm or a castle. It is a piece of sovereign territory. The knights within it answer to no local bishop, no lord, no king. Their one and only master on earth is the Pope himself. This singular allegiance gives them a breathtaking degree of autonomy. Their lands are exempt from taxes. Their chapels can ignore local interdicts. They move across borders with an impunity that no one else enjoys. They are the first truly multinational entity. Let us feel the texture of their power. You, the merchant, need to transfer a large sum of money from your Paris office to your agent in Venice. To carry that much gold would be suicide. The roads are rife with bandits. But you do not have to. You can walk into the Paris Temple, a sprawling, fortified complex that serves as the financial heart of the city. You deposit your gold and receive a piece of parchment, a letter of credit, encrypted with a cipher known only to the order. You travel to Venice, present your letter at the Templar house there, and receive your funds minus a small commission. You have just used the most sophisticated and trusted banking network in the world. The Templars are not just warrior monks. They are the financiers of Christendom. They bankroll wars, they loan vast sums to indebted monarchs, they manage the estates of the nobility. Their financial power is not merely substantial. It is foundational to the European economy. Now, let us glimpse the inner world. Beyond the stone walls and the counting houses, there is a life of extreme discipline and profound secrecy. Picture a young man taking his vows. He kneels in a locked chapel late at night before only other professed knights. No outsiders are ever permitted to witness the initiation. He swears an oath of poverty, chastity, and obedience. He gives up all personal property. Even the clothes on his back now belong to the order. He is now part of a rigid hierarchy, a chain of command that stretches from his local commander all the way to the Grand Master. His daily life is a stark contrast to the order's corporate wealth. It is a cycle of prayer, Spartan meals, eaten in silence, weapons training, and the tending of horses and armor. He is a hybrid creature, a fusion of the contemplative monk and the elite special forces soldier, a concept that was utterly revolutionary for its time. And what of their knowledge? In an age where literacy was rare and knowledge was jealously guarded primarily by the monastic scriptoriums of the Benedictines and Cistercians, the Templars represented a parallel system. They were in constant contact with the Middle East, not just as warriors, but as diplomats and traders. They absorbed knowledge from Byzantine and Islamic cultures, mathematics, architecture, medicine, astronomy. Their great round churches, like the Temple Church in London, were architectural marvels thought by some to be inspired by the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, built upon what they believed to be the foundation of Solomon's temple. This connection to the Temple of Solomon is not incidental. It is central to their identity. It hints at a deeper purpose beyond protecting pilgrims and managing wealth. Was their true quest the recovery of something lost? An artifact, a text, a secret lineage of knowledge, a sacred geometry, a gnosis that they believed stretched back to the very origins of their faith, the secrets of their chapter meetings, the meaning of their symbols, like the two knights sharing a single horse or the mysterious bearded head they were later accused of worshiping, were protected with an oath of absolute silence. To reveal the secrets of the order was a sin punishable by expulsion and eternal damnation. This was the order in its prime, a financial superpower, a formidable military force, and a secret society all in one. They were woven into the very fabric of medieval society. To the average person, the Knights Templar were as permanent and unshakable as the stone of the great cathedrals then rising across Europe. To imagine a world without them would have been like imagining a world without the sky. They were simply there, a fixed and eternal point in a chaotic world, and any system that believes itself to be eternal is dangerously blind to the first signs of its own collapse. The fragility of any system, no matter how powerful, is often revealed not by a slow decay, but by a sudden, unthinkable shock. For the Knights Templar, that shock arrived with the dawn on a day that would live in infamy. Let us set the scene. It is the autumn of 1307. King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair for his handsome features, rather than his temperament, is deeply catastrophically in debt. And his biggest creditor is the Templar Order. The king is a man of cold, ruthless ambition, who has already debased his kingdom's currency, expelled the Jews to seize their assets, and is locked in a brutal power struggle with the papacy itself. He sees the Templars not as defenders of the faith, but as an arrogant, independent state within his own state, a repository of immense wealth that he cannot touch. And a king like Philip does not tolerate such things. For months, a secret plan has been in motion. A plan of stunning audacity and breathtaking logistical complexity. Sealed letters penned in the king's name have been dispatched to his royal seneschals and bailiffs in every corner of the kingdom. These letters are to be held unopened until a specific, predetermined night. The instructions within are precise, absolute, and terrifying. Now, picture the evening of Thursday, October 12th. Across France, in hundreds of preceptories, the Templar Knights eat their final meal in peace. They say their nightly prayers. They have no reason to suspect anything is amiss. Their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, is in Paris, having been lured there under friendly pretenses by the king himself. The Order's intelligence network, once the envy of Europe, is silent. It has been either completely compromised or has grown fatally complacent. The Knights sleep secure in the protection of their papal charters and their centuries of prestige. Then, comes the dawn. Friday the 13th of October. Before the sun has cleared the horizon, the quiet of the morning is shattered. It is the splintering of heavy oak doors, the clang of steel on stone, the shouts of armed men. In a single, coordinated wave, the king's soldiers storm every Templar property in France. They move with brutal efficiency. The knights caught completely off guard, outnumbered in their beds, are dragged from their cells. There is no glorious last stand, no pitched battle. There is only shock confusion and the cold reality of iron shackles. From the powerful Paris temple to the smallest rural farm, the operation is a staggering success. Jacques de Molay himself is arrested. Within hours, the backbone of the Templar order in its most crucial territory has been broken. Let us pause and consider this from an academic logistical standpoint. In an era without telegraphs, without radio, without any form of instantaneous communication, Philip IV achieved something that should have been impossible. He managed a perfectly synchronized kingdom-wide military operation in total secrecy. How was there not a single leak? How did not one loyal servant, one sympathetic priest, one friend of the order send a warning? The Templars had friends and informants everywhere. For them to be caught so utterly blind suggests a conspiracy of silence and infiltration on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. It defies the operational logic of the 14th century. Furthermore, why didn't they fight back, even surprised these were elite, battle-hardened warriors? Yet, the records show almost no resistance. The traditional explanation is that they were honorable men caught in a legal trap by a Christian king, and they believed their innocence and the Pope's protection would ultimately prevail. They submitted to the king's justice, never imagining the depths of the betrayal that was to come. Perhaps. Or perhaps the orders from the top from a compromised or coerced leadership were simply to stand down. The official charges, when they are finally read out, are designed for maximum shock and horror heresy, idolatry, spitting on the cross, institutionalized sodomy. The propaganda machine of the state grinds into motion, painting the once revered knights as monstrous heretics. The trials that follow will be a mockery of justice built on confessions extracted under the most horrific torture. But in the immediate aftermath of that dawn raid, as thousands of knights languished in royal dungeons, a new and even more perplexing mystery began to surface. Philip had captured the men. He had seized their lands and their castles. But a chilling question soon began to haunt the royal court and echo through the centuries. Where was the treasure? And more importantly, where were the archives? For you can imprison men, but you cannot so easily imprison an idea. The official record is a tidy one, an order grown too proud and powerful, a greedy king, a weak pope, a dramatic trial, and a final fiery end. It is a story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. But history is rarely so neat. The official record is often merely the story that the victors agreed to tell. To find the other possibilities, we must look in the gaps, listen to the silences, and follow the threads that lead away from the main narrative. We must ask what happens when thousands of dedicated, intelligent, and resourceful men, belonging to the most powerful network in the world, are told that their world is over. Do they all simply vanish? Or do some of them escape? This is where our investigative journey truly begins. We are leaving the well-lit room of accepted history and entering the twilight of hypothesis. We will explore 3 primary theories of Templar survival, each compelling in its own right, each pointing to a different path the scattered knights might have taken. Our first and perhaps most famous hypothesis takes us north to a wild, rebellious kingdom that had become a thorn in the side of both England and the papacy. This is the Scottish hypothesis. Its narrative begins not in a dungeon, but on the water. While King Philip was successful in capturing the Templars on French soil, he failed to capture one of their most significant assets, their fleet. The Templar fleet, based at the Atlantic port of La Rochelle, was a formidable force. On the eve of the arrests, it vanished. Historical records show that it simply sailed away, its destination unknown. Its vast holds reputedly filled with the order's accumulated treasure, and more importantly, its sacred archives and relics. The disappearance of this fleet is not a conspiracy theory. It is a historical fact. A genuine mystery. Where did it go? The theory posits that its destination was Scotland. Let us consider the political landscape of 1307. Scotland, under the leadership of the legendary Robert the Bruce, was in the midst of a brutal war for independence against King Edward of England. Moreover, Bruce had been excommunicated by the Pope for murdering his rival, John Comyn, in a church. This meant that in the eyes of the Catholic Church, Scotland was a rogue state. The Pope's decrees, including the one demanding the arrest of all Templars, held no legal power there. For a Templar knight fleeing persecution, Scotland was not just a potential refuge. It was perhaps the only safe harbor in Europe. It was a kingdom outside the law, led by a king who had every reason to welcome a contingent of elite battle-hardened warriors with significant financial resources, and a grudge against the very powers, the French monarchy and the papacy, that were also his enemies. The symbiosis is almost perfect. The Templars needed a sanctuary, and Robert the Bruce desperately needed their skills and their wealth. The legend then leaps forward 7 years to a pivotal moment in Scottish history, the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. The Scottish army, vastly outnumbered by the English, was on the verge of being overwhelmed. The fate of the nation hung in the balance. And then, at the critical moment, something happened. Accounts, though, fiercely debated by historians, speak of a new contingent of well-equipped mounted knights appearing on the battlefield. They fought with a discipline and fury that stunned the English forces. They carried no royal banner, but fought as an independent unit, turning the tide of the battle and securing a legendary victory for Scotland. The legend holds that this mysterious force was a group of Knights Templar making their public debut in service to their new protector, Robert the Bruce. They had repaid their debt. The evidence for this hypothesis, supporters claim, is not merely in legend, but carved in stone. We must travel to a small, unassuming village just south of Edinburgh, to a chapel that is unlike any other in the world, Rosslyn Chapel. Built in the mid-15th century by William Sinclair, the Earl of Orkney, whose family is claimed by some to have deep Templar connections, Rosslyn is not so much a place of worship as it is a library of esoteric knowledge rendered in stone. Its interior is a dizzying forest of symbols, a testament to a craft and a philosophy that seems to defy its time and place. Here, among the intricate carvings of biblical scenes, one finds things that should not be there. There are hundreds of green men, pagan symbols of rebirth and nature, their faces peering out from behind a veil of leaves. There are intricate geometric patterns that echo the principles of sacred geometry. Most astoundingly, there are carvings that appear to be ears of maize or corn and depictions of the aloe vera plant species native to the Americas, which were supposedly unknown to Europeans until Columbus's voyages nearly 50 years after Rosslyn was built. Proponents of the theory ask, could these carvings be evidence of pre-Columbian transatlantic voyages financed by Templar wealth and guided by ancient maps from their archives? The chapel itself is said to be a replica in part of Solomon's temple, and its pillars and carvings are rife with imagery that would later become central to Freemasonry. It is seen by many as the physical link, the architectural bridge between the suppressed Templar order and the craft of the stonemasons. The theory suggests that the exiled Templars in Scotland, needing to preserve their knowledge and their identity, in secret integrated themselves with the existing highly organized guilds of stonemasons. These guilds already had a system of lodges, secret modes of recognition, and a tradition of passing down knowledge. They provided the perfect cover. Over the generations, the military aspect of the Templar tradition would have faded, but its esoteric core, the geometry, the philosophy, the rituals of initiation, would have been preserved, protected, and passed down. The warrior's sword was reforged into the builder's trowel. This, the hypothesis claims, is the true origin of speculative Freemasonry. It was born not from English gentlemen's clubs, but from the cold, defiant hills of Scotland, a legacy of the knights who escaped the flames. Our second hypothesis offers a different, though no less compelling narrative of survival. It takes us from the stormy north to the sun-drenched shores of the Iberian Peninsula, specifically to Portugal. This is the maritime hypothesis. Unlike King Philip of France, King Dinas of Portugal refused to persecute the Templars in his realm. He valued their role in fighting the Moors and recognized their economic importance. Instead of destroying them, he played a masterful political game. After a sham trial in which the knights were declared innocent, King Dinas negotiated with the Pope. The Knights Templar would be officially disbanded in Portugal as the decree required. But in 1319, just a few years later, a new order was created by the king, the Military Order of Christ. This was not merely a new order. It was a legal and institutional reincarnation. The Order of Christ inherited all of the Knights Templars' assets in Portugal, their castles, their lands, their wealth, their personnel, and presumably their secrets. The Knights simply changed the name on their uniform. The Red Cross of the Templars was subtly redesigned into the Cross of the Order of Christ, but the lineage was direct and unbroken. Here, the survival was not secret or underground. It was overt, state-sanctioned, and hiding in plain sight. But what did this new order do? It turned its focus from the land to the sea. The Grand Master of the Order of Christ was none other than Prince Henry the Navigator. It was this order, using its immense inherited wealth, the very Templar treasure that Philip of France could never find, that financed and drove Portugal's legendary Age of Discovery. The caravels that sailed down the coast of Africa around the Cape of Good Hope and across the Atlantic to Brazil did so with the Order's cross emblazoned upon their sails. This hypothesis asks a profound question. Were these voyages merely about finding a sea route for the spice trade, or was there a deeper hidden agenda? Could the Templar archives, safely transported to Portugal, have contained maps and geographical knowledge far beyond what was commonly known in Europe? Could the quest for the Indies have been a cover for a quest to find a rumored land across the Atlantic, a New Jerusalem? This theory suggests the Templar legacy didn't evolve into a secret philosophical society, but into a global, maritime empire builder. It shaped the very map of the modern world. It is a powerful narrative of survival through adaptation, turning a military order into a naval powerhouse that changed the course of history. Finally, we turn to our third hypothesis, which is perhaps the most abstract and the most difficult to prove, yet in some ways the most profound. This is the esoteric underground hypothesis. It posits that the true survival of the Templars was not the survival of an institution, but the survival of an idea. This theory suggests that the Templars, through their extensive contact with the mystical traditions of the East, with Sufi mystics, with Gnostic Christian sects, with Jewish Kabbalists in the Holy Land, had become the guardians of a syncretic esoteric doctrine, a gnosis, a secret knowledge that posited a more personal, direct connection to the Divine One that bypassed the rigid hierarchy of the Orthodox Church. When the order was shattered as a physical institution, this idea was not destroyed. It was atomized. The surviving knights who scattered across Europe and historical records confirm that many outside of France escaped arrest did not just carry their swords and their bitterness. They carried this knowledge with them. They became a diaspora of secrets. These individuals would have sought refuge not in new armies, but in like-minded communities. They would have been drawn to the existing esoteric undercurrents of Europe, the alchemists seeking the philosopher's stone, the Hermeticists studying ancient Egyptian texts, the burgeoning Rosicrucian movement. According to this view, the Templar idea went underground, flowing like a subterranean river, nourishing various secret societies and philosophical movements throughout the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. It was a legacy of thought, not of bloodline or charter. Then, in the 17th and 18th centuries, a new, uniquely suited vessel emerged: speculative Freemasonry. The lodges, with their emphasis on morality, brotherhood, geometry, and a symbolic journey from darkness to light, became the natural inheritors of this scattered esoteric legacy. Freemasonry didn't descend directly from the Templar organization, but it became the focal point where the Templar idea, along with other streams of esoteric thought, could finally coalesce and find a new stable home. The symbolic similarities, therefore, are not proof of a direct institutional lineage, but of a shared philosophical DNA. The Freemasons became the heirs of the Templars, not because a Templar knight founded a lodge in Scotland, but because the foundational questions and secret answers that obsessed the Templars found their most fertile ground in the intellectual and spiritual soil of the Masonic Lodge. It is a theory of intellectual rather than physical succession. 3 theories: one of survival through stealth and alliance in Scotland, one of survival through open transformation in Portugal, and one of survival as a persistent underground idea that flowed through time until it found its final home. Each presents a compelling narrative. Each is backed by its own set of clues, artifacts, and logical arguments. And each, we must now admit, faces serious challenges from the world of mainstream historical scholarship. Before we allow these romantic and powerful narratives to carry us away, we must exercise the core discipline of our shared journey. We must put on the mantle of the skeptic. The role of the historian is not to tell the most exciting story, but to tell the story that is best supported by verifiable contemporary evidence. Now, with the same respect we gave to the hypotheses, we must give to the counter-arguments. We must willingly step back into the bright and sometimes unforgiving light of academic scrutiny. Let us begin with the cornerstone of the most popular theory, the Scottish hypothesis. It is a magnificent tale of daring escapes, dramatic battles, and stone-carved secrets. The first and most significant challenge comes from the story of the Templars at the Battle of Bannockburn. Mainstream historians point out a critical problem. The earliest and most reliable chronicles of the battle, those written closest to the event, make absolutely no mention of any Templar or other mysterious force turning the tide. The story of the Templar intervention appears for the first time in the writings of Hector Boas, a Scottish historian in the early 16th century, nearly 200 years after the battle. Later writers then embellished Boas's account. The historical method demands that we prioritize contemporary sources over later ones, as stories tend to grow and become more dramatic with each telling. From a purely evidentiary standpoint, the Bannockburn legend appears to be just that, a legend, a piece of patriotic folklore created long after the fact to add even more luster to a great national victory. Then, there is the magnificent puzzle box of Rosslyn Chapel. Could its carvings truly be proof of a Templar Masonic link and pre-Columbian voyages? Academic art historians and botanists offer more mundane, though no less interesting explanations. The famous carvings identified as maize, they argue, are highly stylized depictions of native European plants such as lilies, strawberries, or even wheat. The style of the carving, they contend, is consistent with other late Gothic floral patterns and requires no appeal to exotic foreign species. The aloe vera is likewise identified as a stylized representation of a common fern or thistle. As for the green men and other esoteric symbols, historians point out that such imagery, while fascinating, was not exclusive to any single secret society. The green man is a common motif in medieval church carvings across Europe, representing themes of rebirth and the untamed forces of nature. Rosslyn is undeniably a unique and mysterious place, but the mainstream view holds that its mystery stems from the singular vision of its founder, William Sinclair, and the flourishing of late medieval artistry, not from a hidden Templar blueprint. The documented connections between the Sinclair family and the historical Templar order are, upon close inspection, considered tenuous by most historians. Finally, the most crucial link, the claim that Scottish Freemasonry is the direct descendant of these refugee knights. Here, the documentary evidence is simply not there. The historian David Stevenson, one of the foremost experts on the origins of Freemasonry, has meticulously studied the earliest surviving records of Scottish lodges, such as the Shaw statutes of the late 16th century and the minutes of Lodge Aitchison's Haven. These foundational documents show a clear evolution from a practical operative guild of stonemasons to a more speculative or philosophical society, but they contain no mention of Knights Templar chivalric degrees or a hidden history. The so-called higher degrees of Freemasonry that explicitly incorporate Templar lore, such as the Knight of the Temple, appear to have been invented and added to the Masonic system, much later, primarily in the mid-18th century in France and Germany. This was the era of the strict observance, a Masonic rite started by Baron von Hund, who claimed to have received his authority from unknown secret superiors he linked to the Templars. Most historians see this not as the revealing of an ancient truth, but as a romantic invention of 18th century Freemasons who, just like the academics suggest, were captivated by the Templar legend and sought to graft it onto their own fraternity. The connection, they argue, flows from Masonry back to the Templars, not the other way around. Now, let us turn our skeptical eye to the Portuguese hypothesis. Here, the historical facts are not in dispute. The Templars in Portugal did become the Order of Christ. The Order of Christ did spearhead the Age of Discovery. The counter-argument here is not about facts, but about interpretation and motive. The mainstream view argues that this was a fundamental transformation, not a simple continuation. The Order of Christ was first and foremost an instrument of the Portuguese state. It was nationalized. Its mission was no longer supranational or beholden to a mystical grand master, but was explicitly tied to the commercial and colonial ambitions of the Portuguese crown. Its grand masters were members of the royal family. The argument that they were guided by secret Templar maps is met with a demand for evidence. Where are these maps? Why is there no mention of them in the extensive records of the Portuguese navigators? Historians argue that the Portuguese success was based on systematic, incremental exploration down the coast of Africa, combined with significant advances in shipbuilding, cartography, and navigational science like the astrolabe. These were practical, observable achievements. The motives were also painfully clear and well-documented: a desire to break the Venetian and Ottoman monopoly on the spice trade, the search for African gold, and a genuine, if often brutal, religious zeal to convert new populations to Christianity. These powerful conventional motives are sufficient to explain the Age of Discovery, invoking a secret, multi-generational Templar quest for a lost land, while romantic is seen as an unnecessary and unproven complication. The survival was institutional and financial, yes, but the soul of the order, its original purpose, and supposed esoteric core was likely extinguished in the process of becoming an arm of the state. Finally, we must address the most elusive theory, the esoteric underground. This hypothesis is, from a historian's perspective, the most difficult to engage with, because it is, by its very nature, resistant to falsification. A secret underground stream of ideas leaves few, if any, documents. Its influence is, by definition, hidden. The historian's response is simple and consistent. Where is the proof? Where is the chain of transmission? We can see that figures like Hermes Trismegistus concepts from the Kabbalah and alchemical symbolism became immensely popular during the Renaissance and were later incorporated into Masonic ritual. But historians argue that this does not require a secret Templar conduit. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 sent a wave of Greek-speaking scholars into Europe, bringing with them a vast library of classical texts, including the works of Plato, Plotinus, and the Corpus Hermeticum, which had been largely lost to the West. This sparked a massive intellectual and spiritual revival. Educated men across Europe were suddenly exposed to a torrent of new mystical ideas. It was this occult revival of the Renaissance, this public flourishing of ancient philosophies, that was in the air. Freemasonry as a fraternity, composed of educated, inquisitive men in the 17th and 18th centuries, naturally drew from this rich public well of esoteric thought. It didn't need a secret society to tell it about sacred geometry or the journey of the soul. These were the trending topics of intellectual life at the time. The connection to Templarism in this view is a classic case of mistaken identity, attributing to a single secret source what was actually a broad public intellectual movement. And so we are left in a state of profound tension. For every compelling hypothesis, there is a sober and well-reasoned counter-argument. For every whisper of a hidden history, there is the clear voice of the documented record. The romantic storyteller and the skeptical academic stand opposed. We find ourselves at an impasse. A fascinating, productive, but undeniable impasse. On one side, we have a series of captivating narratives of survival, each filled with tantalizing clues: a vanished fleet, a tide-turning battle, a chapel filled with stone enigmas, a state-sanctioned reincarnation, a persistent underground idea. These stories resonate with our innate sense of justice and our love for a good mystery. They offer a sense of continuation, a belief that something so powerful could not simply be extinguished. On the other side, we have the rigorous, disciplined voice of academic history, which demands verifiable proof and contemporary documentation. This voice patiently dismantles each piece of romantic evidence, offering more mundane, though plausible explanations. It presents a story not of survival, but of suppression, followed centuries later by romantic invention. So, where does that leave us? To simply declare one side the winner and the other the loser would be to miss the entire point of this journey. The most profound questions are rarely resolved with a simple verdict. Perhaps the key is to shift our perspective. Instead of asking which story is true, we should ask a more systemic question. Why does this tension exist in the first place? Why is the official narrative so resistant to these alternative ideas, and why are the alternative ideas so incredibly persistent even in the face of skeptical inquiry? The answer may lie not in the events of the 14th century, but in the very nature of how we write and protect history itself. Let us first examine the world of the academic historian. It is governed by what we might call the tyranny of the document. The discipline of history is built upon a foundation of primary sources: contemporary letters, chronicles, legal statutes, financial records. A historian's greatest responsibility is to not invent, to not speculate beyond what the evidence can support. This is not a flaw. It is the essential mechanism that prevents history from dissolving into fiction. When a historian looks at the Templar Masonic connection, they see a 400-year gap in the documentary record. There is no known letter from an escaped Templar to his descendant. There is no lodge minute book from the 15th century that mentions the preservation of Templar rights. For the historian, this silence is not a mystery to be filled with speculation. It is the answer. The absence of evidence in this case is treated as evidence of absence. This is the great gatekeeping mechanism of the historical profession. It is a necessary shield against fantasy, but it can also become a wall, deflecting possibilities that by their very secret nature would not have left a paper trail. Furthermore, we must consider the nature of academic consensus. Like any field of human knowledge, history builds upon established frameworks. The current framework, that Freemasonry's Templar elements are an 18th century invention, is a strong one built on decades of research. To overturn such a consensus requires an extraordinary weight of new unambiguous evidence. This academic inertia is a feature, not a bug. It ensures stability and prevents the field from being swayed by every new fad or theory. However, it can also create a systemic resistance to paradigm-shifting ideas. The burden of proof lies squarely on the challenger, and when the challenge involves a secret society providing that proof, becomes almost impossible. Now, let us turn the lens around and look at the systemic motives behind the original event. The destruction of the Templars is often painted as the act of a single, greedy king. But it was more than that. It was a pivotal moment in the formation of the modern nation-state. King Philip IV was not just a man. He was the embodiment of a new idea of centralized secular power. The Templars, with their supranational allegiance and their independent economic and military power, were a living challenge to that idea. They were a relic of an older model of the world. Their destruction was not merely about seizing their gold. It was about the nascent state asserting its absolute authority by eliminating a rival power structure. It was a systemic, not just a personal act. Pope Clement V, in turn, was not simply a weak man, but the leader of an institution, the papacy fighting for its own survival against the rising tide of royal power. He likely sacrificed the Templars a powerful piece on the board to prevent the French king from checkmating the papacy itself. When we see these systemic forces at play, the official story makes perfect sense on a political level. But it leaves those frustrating, untidy gaps, the fleet, the archives, the sheer implausibility of such a perfect collapse. The alternative theories are so persistent precisely because they rush to fill these gaps. They provide a narrative logic where the official record offers only a frustrating silence. They create order out of chaos. The result is this perfect, unresolved tension. The official story is methodologically sound, but narratively incomplete. The alternative stories are narratively satisfying, but methodologically weak. We are left standing in the space between the two, a space of profound and fertile uncertainty. Perhaps then, the true value of the Great Templar mystery is not to be found in its final solution. Perhaps its enduring power lies not in what it tells us about the 14th century, but in the profound philosophical questions it forces us to ask about ourselves here in the 21st. We have spent this time together as historical detectives, but now let us put on the robe of the philosopher. Let us move from the what happened to the what does it mean. The central conflict we have explored is one between a documented, logical, yet somewhat sterile account and a series of speculative, unproven, yet deeply romantic narratives. This forces us to confront a fundamental question about the human mind. Do we truly seek the truth, or do we seek a story that gives us comfort and meaning? The academic account of the Templars' end is a story of brutal finality. An organization was destroyed. Its members were killed or scattered. Its legacy ended. It is a tragedy with a full stop at the end. The alternative theories, on the other hand, tell a story of survival, of secret knowledge, preserved, of a legacy that flows like a hidden river beneath the surface of history. It is a story of continuation of meaning that was not lost, but merely concealed. Which of these is more appealing to the human spirit? We are at our core narrative creatures. We make sense of the world not through spreadsheets and data points, but through stories. A good story has heroes, villains, secrets, and a sense of purpose. The legend of the Templars surviving to found Freemasonry is an exceptionally good story. It has all the elements of a timeless myth. It speaks to a deep and powerful human longing for there to be more than meets the eye, for there to be a hidden order beneath the apparent chaos of the world, for wisdom to be not destroyed, but carefully guarded for a worthy future generation. Is it possible that the durability of this legend has less to do with its factual basis and more to do with its profound psychological and mythological resonance? We may not be able to prove that the Freemasons are the heirs of the Templars, but the story's persistence proves that we want them to be. We want to believe that wisdom is never truly lost. This brings us to the value of the question itself. Throughout this journey, we have attempted to practice a form of healthy skepticism, to hold belief and disbelief in a delicate balance. It is crucial to distinguish this from cynicism. Cynicism is the lazy reflex of dismissing anything that challenges our current understanding. Skepticism is the noble and difficult work of questioning everything, including our own assumptions and the official stories we are told. The alternative hypotheses about the Templars, even if they are ultimately proven wrong, serve an invaluable purpose. They are the engines of inquiry. They force us to look closer at the accepted record, to re-examine the evidence, to question the silence. The search for a hidden Templar fleet might not lead to the fleet itself, but it might uncover new, verifiable knowledge about 14th century maritime capabilities or the political climate of Scotland. The question, even if its premise is flawed, is a powerful tool for discovery. Ultimately, the Templar mystery is a perfect training ground for one of the most vital and underrated of all intellectual virtues, humility. It teaches us to embrace uncertainty, to be able to hold two contradictory ideas in our minds simultaneously, to understand and respect the rigorous methodology of the academic who says there is no proof, while also understanding and appreciating the narrative power of the legend that says absence of proof is not proof of absence, is the mark of a truly mature intellect. True wisdom is not found in the arrogant certainty of having all the answers. It is found in the quiet humility of living with the questions. The greatest value of this entire historical puzzle is that it has no easy solution. It forces us to remain in that space of not knowing, and it is in that space that true curiosity, reflection, and learning can begin. And so, as we near the end of our shared meditation, the focus of the inquiry must turn finally from them to us. We have been exploring ancient secret societies, organizations defined by the knowledge they protected and the truths they concealed from the outside world. We live today in what we believe to be an open age, an age of information. Yet we are surrounded by our own modern-day secret societies, closed systems of belief, political echo chambers, and digital worlds governed by algorithms we cannot see. We are bombarded with official narratives from governments and corporations, and we are tempted by the endless stream of alternative truths that flourish online. The real haunting question that the Templar mystery leaves us with is not about their secrets, but about our own. What is the official story you tell about your own life? The one you present to the world, neat and tidy, with a clear narrative arc. And what are the forgotten chapters? The alternative hypotheses about yourself that you only dare to explore in the quietest hours of the night. What secret knowledge about your own potential, your own fears, your own deepest purpose have you kept hidden even from yourself, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered? The search for the lost Templar treasure is a fascinating historical pursuit. But perhaps the real treasure is the realization that the most profound mysteries are not buried in the vaults of the past, but lie waiting to be explored within the temple of our own minds. And so our walk through the shadowed aisles of the Library of Forgotten Histories comes to a temporary close. The single candle that has lit our path has burned low, and the ancient books around us seem to retreat once more into the quiet darkness. We began this journey with a simple question. Could the Freemasons be the heirs of the Knights Templar? We leave not with a simple answer, but with the profound resonance of the question itself, a resonance that now echoes with far greater complexity and depth. The central mystery remains like a ghost that refuses to be exorcised from the halls of history. It is the whisper of a vow made in a 12th century chapel, heard again in the rituals of an 18th century lodge. It is the faint shadow of a Templar cross seen in the design of a Masonic apron. It is the story of a catastrophic ending that somehow feels like an unfinished chapter. On one hand, we have the weight of the historical record, a fortress of logic and documented fact that tells us no, the connection is a myth, a romantic dream. On the other hand, we have the persistent, almost archetypal power of the legend, a story of survival, so compelling, so narratively satisfying, that it has survived for centuries without needing the permission of documented proof. The truth, if it is to be found, all likely lies somewhere in the vast gray twilight between these two poles. It is a truth that is not shouted as a certainty, but whispered as a possibility. Our journey has not been about arriving at a final destination. It has been about learning how to navigate this twilight. It has been about understanding that the poetry of legend and the prose of history are not always enemies, but can be two different languages attempting to describe the same ineffable thing. The final answer remains elusive, shimmering just beyond the reach of the candlelight, and perhaps that is exactly as it should be. For the most beautiful mysteries are not the ones we solve, but the ones that forever invite us to keep searching. Our shared investigation for tonight may be over, but the inquiry itself is endless. This conversation does not end when the audio fades. If this journey of questioning, of holding space for both evidence and mystery resonates with the way you see the world, I warmly invite you to subscribe and join our community of thoughtful explorers. Our aim is to build a space where curiosity is the only prerequisite and a well-formed question is valued more than a final answer. To that end, I now turn the question over to you. The comments below are our modern-day forum, a place for us to share the clues we have gathered and the perspectives we have formed. I am not interested in a simple poll of who believes and who does not. I would be genuinely fascinated to read your thoughtful analysis. For instance, which of the mainstream counterarguments did you find most persuasive, and why? Was it the historian's reliance on contemporary documents to debunk the Bannockburn legend? Or was it the argument that the esoteric ideas in Masonry were simply in the air during the Renaissance, requiring no secret Templar source? Conversely, what piece of the alternative narrative still lingers in your mind, troubling the tidy official story? Is it the complete and utter disappearance of the Templar fleet? Is it the undeniable and overt reincarnation of the order in Portugal? Or is it the sheer symbolic power of a place like Rosslyn Chapel? And on a more philosophical level, do you believe it is possible for a complex tradition to survive for centuries through oral and ritual transmission alone, leaving almost no documentary trace? Please share your thoughts below. Read the perspectives of others. Let us engage not in argument, but in a collective process of discovery. There are no right or wrong answers here, only more refined questions and a deeper appreciation for the mystery. Thank you sincerely for lending me your time and your attention. Until we meet again, stay curious,